natural junction. And this tiny natural junction in an otherwise solid block was acting just like the much more delicate junction between the end of a wire and a crystal that Bose had discovered. Except here it was sensitive to light. The ingot had cracked because either side contained slightly different amounts of impurities. One side had slightly more of the element phosphorus, while the other had slightly more of a different impurity, boron. And electrons seemed to be able to move across from the phosphorus side to the boron side, but not vice versa. Photons of light shining down onto the crystal were knocking electrons out of the atoms, but it was the impurity atoms that were driving this flow. Phosphorus has an electron that is going spare, and boron is keen to accept another. So electrons tended to flow from the phosphorus side to the boron side, and crucially only flowed one way across the junction. The head of the semiconductor team, William Shockley, saw the potential of this one-way junction within a crystal. But how would it be possible to create a crystal with two junctions in it that could be used as an amplifier? Another researcher at Bell Labs called Gordon Teal had been working on a technique that would allow just that. He'd discovered a special way to grow single crystals of the semiconductor germanium. In this research institute, they grow semiconductor crystals in the same way that Teal did back in Bell Labs. Only here, they grow them much, much bigger. At the bottom of this vat is a container with glowing hot molten germanium, just as pure as you can get it. Inside it are a few atoms of whatever impurity is required to alter its conductive properties. Now, the rotating arm above has a seed crystal at the bottom that has been dipped into the liquid and will be slowly raised up again. As the germanium cools and hardens, it forms a long crystal like an icicle below the seed. The whole length is one single beautiful germanium crystal. Teal worked out that as the crystal is growing, other impurities can be added to the vat and mixed in. This gives us a single crystal with thin layers of different impurities, creating junctions within the crystal. This crystal with two junctions in it was Shockley's dream. Applying a small current through the very thin middle section allows a much larger current to flow through the whole triple sandwich. From a single crystal like this, hundreds of tiny solid blocks could be cut, each containing the two junctions that would allow the movement of electrons through them to be precisely controlled. These tiny and reliable devices could be used in all sorts of electrical equipment.
You cannot have the electronic equipment that we have without tiny components. And you get a weird effect, actually. The smaller they get, the more reliable they get. It's a win-win situation.
The Bell Labs team were awarded the Nobel Prize for their world-changing invention, while the European team were forgotten. William Shockley left Bell Labs and in 1955 set up his own semiconductor laboratory in rural California, recruiting the country's best physics graduates. But the celebratory mood didn't last long, because Shockley was almost impossible to work for.
People left his company because they just disliked the way he treated them. So the fact that Shockley was actually such a git is why you have Silicon Valley. It starts that whole process of spin-off and growth and new companies, and it all starts off with Shockley being such a shocking human being.
The new companies were in competition with each other to come up with the latest semiconductor devices. They made transistors so small that huge numbers of them could be incorporated into an electrical circuit printed on a single slice of semiconductor crystal. These tiny and reliable chips could be used in all sorts of electrical equipment, most famously in computers. A new age had dawned. Today, microchips are everywhere. They've transformed almost every aspect of modern life, from communication to transport and entertainment. But perhaps just as importantly, our computers have become so powerful, they're helping us to understand the universe in all its complexity. A single microchip like this one today can contain around 4 billion transistors. It's incredible how far technology has come in 60 years. It's easy to think that with the great leaps we've made in understanding and exploiting electricity, there's little left to learn about it. But we'd be wrong. For instance, making the circuits smaller and smaller meant that a particular feature of electricity that had been known about for over a century was becoming more and more problematic: resistance. A computer chip has to be continuously cooled. If you take away the fan, this is what happens. Wow, that's shooting up. 100, 120, 130 degrees. 200 degrees, and it cut out. That just took a few seconds and the chip is well and truly cooked. You see, as the electrons flow through the chip, they're not just traveling around unimpeded, they're bumping into the atoms of silicon. And the energy being lost by these electrons is producing heat. Now, sometimes this was useful. Inventors made electric heaters and ovens. And whenever they got something to glow white hot, well, that's a light bulb. But resistance in electronic apparatus and in power lines is the major waste of energy and a huge problem.